shoot you right down at all your feet. Take you home with me. Put you in my house. Boom, 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 boom.
The origins of the nuclear arms race comes to the creation of the Manhattan Project during World War II. On July 16, 1945, the Manhattan Project proved successful by detonating the first atomic bomb, codenamed Trinity, in New Mexico. This later led to the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki 1 month later. Many Americans were frightened by the idea of such raw power in their hands, but nonetheless saw it as a necessary weapon against Japanese and possible Soviet aggression. Robert Oppenheimer and Albert Einstein later expressed regret for participation by Oppenheimer, saying,
"Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
Soviets saw the arraignment of the Americans as a threat and began working fiercely to develop their own superweapon. 2 years later, Soviet scientists working on the Manhattan Project took the blueprints of the atomic bomb and created First Lightning, which was detonated on August 29, 1949, shocking the world. The atomic spy ring, the Soviet scientists leaking the blueprints to the Soviets, were convicted of espionage. For the first time in history, both countries live under the threat of total destruction or thermonuclear war. Now both countries under nuclear threat began working on a larger, brighter superweapon that had the potential to end millions of lives if used. On November 1st, 1952, the United States detonated the first hydrogen bomb, codenamed Ivy Mike.
The Soviets, under extreme pressure, detonated their first H-bomb only a month later. The continuing advancements in weapons of war put the United States and the Soviet Union in a state of uneasy readiness. Precautions such as fallout shelters and constant nuclear attack drills were a common sight during the time. Constant threat from Soviet aggression were also common during the time. These small smits culminated into a key event on February 4, 1957, when the Soviet Union launched the first man-made satellite into space. The country was in a state of disarray, with President Eisenhower quoting the incident as the Sputnik crisis. Not only was it a moral victory for the Soviets, but the missile-carrying Sputnik could carry a nuclear warhead to anywhere in the world in a matter of minutes, leaving the U.S. shamed and defenseless. Months later, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 2, carrying a live dog, shaming the U.S. again.
And I don't mean to be facetious at all, but something to be remembered is that there's a female up there circling Mother Earth.
Well, I think the Russians are ahead of us, but there's no reason for panic because there's never any solution in panic.
The rocket that launched Sputnik number 2 is capable of carrying 1.5 tons hydrogen bomb warhead.
The Russians have licked some of the toughest problems on the basis of the so-called ultimate weapon.
Let's quit acting as if nothing happened, because something has happened, and it has embarrassed us throughout the world.
Not just our pride, but our security is at stake.
The Russians will leave us behind and wait.
That the country is in dire trouble.
This may be our last chance to provide the means of saving Western civilization from annihilation.
After the Sputnik 1 launch, the American government was worried about the so-called missile gap between the US and the USSR, fearing that the USSR already had close to a dozen ICBMs in 1957. The United States began to work furiously to build up their own ICBM stockpile after the Soviet premier claimed that he could produce ICBMs like sausages. All of the numbers of missiles released in the following years were greatly inflated to influence the public to support nuclear research. According to CIA U-2 spy plane reports, the USSR had extremely small ICBM capabilities in the years of Eisenhower and Kennedy. There was a missile gap, just in the US's favor. Another event that advanced aggression between the two superpowers was the U-2 incident. In 1960, President Eisenhower met Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev in Paris to discuss a possible U.S.-Soviet friendship, and to discuss important issues such as a nuclear test ban treaty that would put limitations on the testing of nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, an American U-2 spy plane, thought to be the latest in spy technology and untouchable, was shot over the USSR by a surface-to-air missile while taking pictures of Soviet missile advancements with the plane and the pilot France's Gary Powers both retrieved. The Soviet premier later denounced the U.S.'s act of provocation, and negotiations between the two superpowers fell through, having the test ban treaty signed 3 years later by President Kennedy. Meanwhile, the United States and the Soviet Union continued to test nuclear weapons both within the parameters of the treaty. To test their nuclear weapons, the United States built makeshift towns to be destroyed by nuclear weapons to study nuclear effect and fallout.
That can't be good.
All personnel, it is now 1 minute to 0 time. Put on goggles or turn away. Do not remove goggles or face first until 10 seconds after first light.
Oh, that can't be good at all.
These tests gave the U.S. a better understanding of nuclear protocol and how to survive nuclear attacks. The most powerful man-made explosion ever created was by the Tsar bomb detonated by the Soviets in 1961. The bomb had the potential to wipe out an entire city plus another 300 miles of fallout. The United States responded with the peak of their nuclear stockpile in 1965 with over 31,000 warheads in stock. After the 60s and a fear of nuclear war still high, both superpowers no longer had the economic resources or the will to continue amassing nuclear weapons. During the 70s, both countries signed SALT I and SALT II, which limited their nuclear stockpile significantly. Within the administration of Soviet Premier Mikhail Gorbachev, U.S.-Soviet relations improved dramatically, and both countries cut down their nuclear stockpile even more. In 1991, with the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the arms race was officially over.